Hello, little explorers, and welcome to Funimation 3D, where magical stories bring the world to life. Have you ever stood near a giant mountain and wondered, who made something so huge? Some mountains are so tall they touch the clouds. Some wear snowy caps, some rise like stone castles above the trees, and some stretch across the land like giant walls. But what if, long ago, before anyone knew about rocks pushing and land rising, people believed something far more magical? What if mountains were made by a giant? Today, we're going to hear the legend of the giant who made mountains. Long, long ago, the Earth looked very different from the world we know today. There were forests, rivers, golden fields, and wide open land. Deer ran through the grass, birds flew over the trees, and rivers curved gently across the ground. But there was one strange thing about this ancient world. It was flat, very flat. There were no cliffs, no rocky peaks, no steep hills, and no snowy mountaintops. The wind drifted slowly because it had nowhere to race. The rivers moved quietly because there were no slopes to rush down. Even the clouds seemed bored, floating across the sky with nowhere special to rest. The world was beautiful, but it felt unfinished. Far beyond the forests, in a land no one had ever seen, there lived a giant named Arko. Arko was enormous. He was taller than the tallest pine trees, and his hands were big enough to lift boulders like pebbles. When he stepped across the land, the ground gave a deep, gentle rumble. Boom, boom, boom! But Arko was not a mean giant. He was kind, curious, and quiet. He loved exploring the world and noticing things no one else could see. He would kneel beside rivers and watch the water sparkle. He would listen to birds singing in the treetops. He would lie on the grass and watch clouds drift overhead. One day, Arko climbed onto the biggest hill he could find. He looked across the land as far as his giant eyes could see. Flat fields, flat forests, flat rivers, flat skies. He sighed. "The world needs wonder," Arko whispered. Just then, a breeze swirled around his shoulders and slipped away with a sad little whoosh. The clouds drifted past without stopping. A river curled lazily through the plain like it was half asleep. And suddenly, Arko knew exactly what was missing. High places, wild places, places for the wind to dance and the clouds to gather. Arko smiled and said, "I will build mountains." The very next morning, Arko began his work. He dug his hands deep into the earth and lifted enormous slabs of stone. He carried boulders the size of houses. He pushed giant mounds of earth together. He stacked rock upon rock, higher and higher. At first, he made a hill, then a bigger hill. Then, with one mighty push, he raised the first true mountain. It rose so suddenly and so high that the clouds stopped in surprise. The wind spun around the peak with a joyful whistle. The river at its foot rushed faster, sparkling as it tumbled over stones. Arko laughed with delight, and the sound rolled across the land like thunder. "Yes," he said, "that's what the world was waiting for." So he kept going. He crossed the land with giant strides, lifting, pushing, and shaping. In one place, he built jagged peaks sharp as dragon teeth. In another, he made round green mountains soft as giant sleeping bears. Some he made tall and proud. Others he made long and rolling, stretching across the earth like stone waves frozen in time. But making mountains was not easy. One day, Arko tried to lift the biggest rock he had ever found. He pulled, he pushed, he leaned with all his strength. The ground shook, trees trembled, birds burst into the sky. For a moment, Arko worried. What if I make the mountains too big? What if I change the world too much? So Arko sat quietly and listened. The wind curled happily around the new peaks. The rivers sang louder than before. The animals were exploring places they had never seen. A goat leaped across a rocky ledge. An eagle soared high above the cliffs. A family of bears wandered into cool mountain forests. The world was not afraid. The world was alive. So Arko stood tall again and returned to his work, this time with even greater care. He shaped valleys between the mountains so rivers could flow through them. He left gentle slopes where animals could climb. He He lifted the tallest peak so high that cold snow settled on top and stayed there, sparkling in the sunlight like silver crowns. Soon, waterfalls spilled down the mountainsides. Forests grew along the lower slopes. Mist wrapped around the peaks in the morning. Clouds gathered there like fluffy white visitors, finally finding a place to rest. The earth had changed. It was no longer quiet and flat. It was grand, adventurous, and full of mystery. Years passed, and at last, people came wandering into those lands. They saw the towering peaks and gasped in amazement. They touched the cold stone. They listened to waterfalls crashing into the valleys below. They watched eagles circle near the snowy summits. Who could have made such mighty mountains? They asked. No one knew. But sometimes, on silent evenings, people heard a deep, faraway rumble rolling across the earth. Boom, boom, boom. And some of the elders would smile and say, "Perhaps Arko is still walking somewhere beyond the horizon." Others said that when the sunset glowed red across the peaks, it was the giant's old firelight warming the stones. Some believed that the longest mountain range in the world was once a line of rocks Arko carried in his giant arms. And a few whispered the most magical idea of all. They said Arko never truly left. They believed that after he finished shaping the world, the giant lay down to rest and became part of the mountains themselves. His shoulders became the highest peaks. His hands became cliffs. His sleeping heart became the deep rumble sometimes heard beneath the ground. No one knew for sure, but the legend lived on. And whenever children looked up at the mountains, they imagined a kind giant standing among the clouds, lifting the earth with strong hands and giving the world its wild and wonderful shape. So the next time you see a mountain, don't just think of rock and snow and stone. Think of wind dancing around the peaks. Think of clouds resting on top. Think of rivers racing down the slopes. And maybe, just maybe, imagine Arko the giant smiling as he built a place full of wonder. That is the legend of the giant who made mountains. Thanks for joining us on this magical adventure with Funimation 3D. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Funimation 3D for more amazing legends, magical stories, and learning adventures. See you in the next video, little explorers. Bye!